Dadhood. Modern Dadhood podcast.
That's the stuff. Clear your sinuses a little bit.
It's going to be a silly one, Mark.
You know what? It might be.
It's really nice to see you.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's nice to be seen.
You still got your mustache. Looks healthy.
The mustache?
Yeah.
Thanks. I've been feeding it pretty regularly.
What, for Doritos?
Yeah, I feed it Doritos.
Dorito dust.
Beerios. What's up? What is this?
This is an episode of Modern Dadhood, the podcast.
An ongoing conversation about the joys, challenges, and general insanity of being a dad in this moment. Is that what you mean?
The podcast.
Yes, my name is Mark. Check it. I'm a dad to twins, boys. They're going to be 7 soon.
My name's Adam Flaherty. I'm a dad to 2 daughters who are 10 and 7, just months away from 11 and 8, which is
bananas.
Well, absolutely bananas.
It's bananas.
Real quick for listeners, thanks for being here. We got a good episode for you. For new listeners, because we bring on new listeners frequently.
From time to time.
I don't think I'm just telling myself that. I think that that's true.
Yeah, no, it's true.
For new listeners, you've found the podcast. We're glad you're here. I promise it isn't always this silly and ridiculous, but what you can expect from Modern Dadhood is a lot of conversations celebrating fatherhood and talking about the tough stuff and commiserating and relating to other dads and learning from other dads. And so even though Mark and I kind of have relatively similar fatherhood experiences, maybe in sort of the big picture, many of our guests have very different fatherhood experiences than ours. And so we get the benefit and you get the benefit of learning from them. Did I do a good job?
Well said, man. I mean, you didn't leave anything out.
Oh, there is one thing I left out. All of our previous episodes can be found, wherever podcasts are listened to, wherever you're listening now, but also on our website, moderndadhood.com. So go there and check them out. I want to tell you about today's guest. Today's guest is a motivational speaker named Ed Gerety, who I've been kind of following what he's been up to. And this guy has been doing this for so long, and he just delivers things in a way that teachers or school leadership just can't really do. And I think that is really important and can be very impactful for students. And it was a great chat. So I'm really excited to share that with our listeners and with you and with you, my friend.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about it, dude. I'm excited to hear
it. Mark.
Yeah, that's me.
One of my daughters, my 2nd grade daughter, who's going to be 8 years old, just told me a few minutes ago, and this is kind of timely, that she was one of 3 students in her class who received the gratitude award.
Really?
I couldn't really get out of her exactly what that entails or ways that she really demonstrated gratitude to warrant receiving this award, but I'm sure it was deserved.
That's awesome, dude.
And it's timely because one of the things that I want to ask you about in this episode is conversations around gratitude in your family, because this episode drops just shortly before Thanksgiving. And we're kind of coming into this season where we start thinking about the things that are important to us and being thankful for what we have. And I think it's important to focus on the things that are going really well for us and that we can be grateful for. So I wanted to turn it over to you and ask, what kinds of conversations do you and Jamie have with the boys around gratitude?
It's a good question. First of all, I'm still marveling at the gratitude award. I think that's really cool.
It's cool.
That's awesome. Did she see? I do have one. Did she seem like
she's proud?
Okay. I was wondering if she kind of told you, if she was like, meh, it's whatever, or if she was like really excited.
Well, here's the funny part. She forgot to tell us about it.
But she is a 2nd grader.
But so Sarah and the girls were out a little while ago, and they ran into somebody from my daughter's class, and the daughter's mom said, "Oh, you just recently got the gratitude award, right?" So because her daughter was one of the other 3. So one of my daughter's classmates' moms knew that my daughter had received this, and we didn't even know about it. And so she was like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you." But when she spoke about it, she spoke very proudly.
That's really sweet. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. What was the question? The
question is, do you guys talk about that a lot in your family? And if so, like what kinds of conversations are you having about it? No, they're not grateful? Entitlement?
No, I mean, I think we talk about it. I think, here's the thing. I'm going to just go ahead and say we should probably talk about it more than we actually do. I think we try to demonstrate in our family like a general sense of like thankfulness, appreciation, gratitude, that kind of stuff, particularly around some of the sort of like simple things that it's easy to forget to be appreciative for, appreciative of.
I think both prepositions will work in this context.
Okay, I'll use them both. Like having clothes every morning, to put on. Like having an overabundance of toys. Like having food on the dinner table every night. Like, I don't think we're often like sort of constantly hammering these, but I think both my wife and I try to outwardly appreciate these things whenever we sort of think about it. I'm just thinking of like dinner tonight, we had tacos. I got stuck on a call until past 6 p.m. We do all finally get to the table. And again, it's easy in those moments where she's feeling really exhausted. The kids are annoyed. I'm coming straight from work brain, trying to like get over that hump to, okay, now I'm at home. Now it's like dad brain, home brain.
Yeah.
So it's easy in those moments to just like settle right into like eating and getting past it and go, so I try to be cognizant, of like, I'm sitting down at a meal that like my wife just made, like my kids are here, we're all here. This is wonderful. Like what a wonderful, amazing thing, and again, I don't try to like hammer it, but I make it a point to say, Jamie, this meal's awesome. Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be able to have this, and not, don't really like force the kids, but nudge them,
Yeah.
Little elbow in the side, like, huh? What do you guys have to say?
What if you said something like that to your mom and showed a little appreciation?
Maybe you could say thank you.
Yeah. I mean, Taco Monday at the Checkett household only happens once a week.
I mean, it only happens several times a week.
Better show some appreciation.
Heck yeah, man. Well, what about you guys? Is it like a part of the narrative? Do you carve out space, like...
I would say we're about the same. I think that Sarah and I express gratitude enough that the girls have kind of caught on, and they will sort of say it out of the blue. Like, I'm really
on
thankful.
Their own, without the jab.
Yeah, I'm thankful, for this particular thing or for this thing, which is nice. And nice. I think ultimately it's going to make them happier people in the long run.
Yeah. I will say this, like, one of my kids in particular, I feel like we actually struggle a little bit with getting him to appreciate some of these sort of simple things.
Yeah.
Like I said, like the having clothing and or having food or having a snack, whenever he wants a snack, all these things that we think it's easy to take for granted. Take from granted.
Take
from granted. But yeah, no, it's kind of, we gotten into this sort of weird circumstance where, I was saying, like, we try to show our appreciation. We try to just make it a part of our everyday lives. Like my wife and I, right? We say thank you. We say, oh, isn't this wonderful to have this thing, and somewhere out of, we don't really know where it comes from, but like one of my kids in particular you said the word entitled a little bit ago, and this is what making me think of this. Like, he sort of does come at things a little bit from that perspective, it almost from a natural, like, maybe some of it's just because his brain, is like moving quickly. He's only 6.5. He doesn't always give himself the space to have the foresight to be appreciative or say, that's not like top of mind. And I can understand that, right? Being a 6.5-year-old, but sometimes the way that he sort of comes at things is like from this very like, I want that. Give me that. Where is this? Why don't I have that? Kind of like attitude. And it's thrown my wife and I kind of threw a loop a little bit because neither of us are like that. And we're like, okay, but it's definitely something that we're like aware of, like that we both sort of feel like we have to figure out how to work with this and how to sort of quell this a little bit, because there is so much that we have to be thankful for that we can take for granted. And I don't want my kid, like, I don't know how to say it other than like, I don't want my kid growing up thinking he just gets everything handed to him, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also hard, especially at that age, for them to think about it from any other perspective, right? Like he doesn't know what it's like to be food insecure.
His world is, yes, thankfully.
He doesn't know what it's like to not have all the different clothes and have clean clothes to put on every day.
Right. Yeah, it's weird. I'm constantly sort of balancing this thing of like, if you only knew how the world really was, and also trying to shield him from a fair amount of how the world really is for as long as makes sense, you know? But then at the same time, like inside, he'll say, give me that, or whatever it is he says.
Right.
And I'm like, show some respect, you know, but I'm not coming at him like that, you know?
Well, the reason that I'm asking about this is because in my recent conversation with Ed Gerety, we got into that a little bit, and I wasn't necessarily expecting the conversation to go in that direction, but towards the end of our chat, we got into gratitude a little bit, and I really thought some of the stuff that he was sharing was really interesting. And so I'm excited for you to hear that, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear that. And so I think we're just going to go ahead and transition right into my chat with motivational speaker and author Ed Gerety. Today, I'm fortunate to speak with Ed Gerety, and I know Ed as a professional keynote speaker, but like many of our guests, he's multi-talented. He hosts a podcast called Parents Navigating the Teen Years. He has a new book out called Shine Your Light, and he runs leadership trainings for groups of all sizes. He also happens to be a husband and a dad of 2. And Ed, I know you're a really busy guy, and so I do really appreciate you making the time to chat with me on Modern Dadhood.
Thank you, Adam. I'm really excited to be here and to spend some time with you and your listeners.
So we like to first kind of ask, just tell us a little bit about your family. You've got 2 kids, but I wasn't able to find in my research how old they are. Are they teenagers?
Sure. I have 2 teenagers. Yep. My wife and I, we've been married now for 24 years, and we have 2 teenagers. We have a sophomore right now in college. Our our daughter is a senior in high school. She's on the journey right now of, applying for colleges and that whole journey that involves.
It's a journey that I'm not particularly looking forward to. It seems pretty overwhelming. I mean, you've got one in college. So how has that process gone for your family?
You know, when you talk about parenting, one of the critical stages and one of the most challenging stages as a parent is having your kids launch, having them make the transition from going from living at home to going off to college and going out into the quote unquote real world. And so it's definitely has been a transition, but he's playing lacrosse in college. That was a big goal of his all through school. And so he's loving the sport that he plays. He loves the university he goes to. He goes to Bentley University just outside of Boston, and he's having a great experience there.
Nice. Yeah, my nephew just graduated from there recently. So I first became aware of you when I was in middle school or high school, and I saw you present to a group a couple times. I think I was in either like a student council or an executive board for my class, and we would occasionally go to leadership retreats. And I remember seeing you several times over the course of several years, and I imagine you were doing similar presentations for high schools all over New England. So you were really getting around, and this was the early 2000s. You have been all over the country doing this work. I mean, how has it been going?
It's been a wild journey, Adam. When I look back, I started my business doing inspirational programs, leadership development programs back when I was a junior in college. And I'd always been involved with a lot of sports and a lot of leadership programs when I was in high school. And that continued in college. And I was always into the personal development work and leadership development work. And so my junior year in college, I started volunteering, speaking at like elementary schools, talking on like self-esteem and making good choices and goal setting. And I was always in love with that, all that area of focus. And so I started volunteering my junior year in college, doing these programs. And then by my senior year in college, I knew this is what I wanted to do for my work. And so since then, it's amazing to think it's been 32 years now that I've been doing this full time, traveling across North America, working with middle schools, high schools, and college students and parents and educators and business leaders. And so it's been really cool to see how it's evolved over the decades.
I would love to hear about how it's evolved. So I'm sure that some of the messages, the leadership messages, just inspiring kindness in people, the positive message, a lot of that stuff is still relevant to when I heard it, 20 plus years ago. But I'm also willing to bet that in the last 10 or 15 years with, explosive growth of technology, social media, obviously, that probably there's a whole set of new messaging there that's relevant. I wonder, can you give me maybe a few examples of some of the topics that you're discussing now with high school students regularly and why these things are so important?
Sure. It's interesting. When I started even like 20 years ago, some of the messages and the messages that I was sharing with high school students weren't quote unquote maybe age appropriate to share with maybe middle school kids, because the topics were pretty serious, about being drug free, bullying. And so a lot of the examples that I used to give in the high school for those examples about making positive choices really wouldn't resonate with a middle school kid because they were just too intense, the topics. And what I've seen over the years now is they just don't want us talking to high school students about, conflict resolution and being drug free. They want it now into the middle schools, and now they're even to the elementary schools. And I guess the reason for that, one of the reasons is because, the world has just gotten so smaller, and the access to information that the kids get these days has sped up the topic of conversation that need to be addressed at a younger and younger age.
I mean, for better or worse, well, maybe it's just for worse. Our kids live in a world where they can access, anything, right? So,
anything.
When you were telling stories back then about, how bullying can result in somebody committing suicide, that message may not have been appropriate for middle school students, but it may have been more directed for high school. It's like the middle school students are seeing all that same kind of violence when they open their Instagram and start scrolling through.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Adam. Yep. Social media and the technology is not going to go away. So it's more about how do you navigate that, and how do you create the boundaries for that, and how do you educate the students? I think that's the biggest thing I've realized too, is that students in some ways have just become more street smart because they are just inundated with so many messages from so many different directions that in a lot of ways they're very guarded in terms of what they believe to be true and what not what's not to be true, because they get lied to all the time through social media, through what they're supposed to wear, through what they're not supposed to wear, to who they should hang out with, who they shouldn't hang out with. So I think, to go back to your question of like, what's the biggest change you've seen? One is just that the topics are going to a younger and younger age. And then the second thing is, the advance of the social media has created such a disconnect because kids are confusing a relationship to a connection. And they're two separate different things. Just because you connected someone does not mean you have a relationship with someone.
Do you run into issues where, yes, the phone is designed to addict us and keep us using it and staring at it and engaging with it? And yes, social media is full of things that are deceptive. But do you find that when you are teaching young people about that they understand it, or are they looking around thinking to themselves, like, why should we believe that what this old guy is saying to us about social media? He's probably not even on it himself.
I think that's a great point, because there has to be a balance there, because, there was a survey done recently where they asked, what's the worst thing that's happened to adolescents or to teenagers in the last, 20 years? And they would say, well, social media, technology. But then you can reframe that question, say, what's one of the best things that's happened to teens and adolescents in the last 20 years? And that same answer is social media technology. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges with the social media. There's a lot of negativity, but there's been a lot of great things with technology. For example, one of the things that's been so great with social media is that social media has allowed schools and communities to really create a greater social awareness around the mental health issues that teens and that adolescents are going through. And so as a result, technology has been a great resource for so many parents and for educators and for those that work with youth to say, how do I help my youth if they're dealing with this particular issue? Where before you wouldn't be able to get easy access to that information, to those solutions. And support groups. Think about all the amazing support groups that have been created through Facebook and other social media channels where people can get online and support one another, encourage one another. So I do think it's important to have a balance of it because, and there are some schools that I go into where students go into a classroom and the teacher has them use their phone as a great tool, a great learning tool too. So I think it's really important to balance those two out. But it's like anything, too much is too much of anything. And so you have to try to find that balance.
What are some things that you have found in recent years that can create a lot of unease or tension or imbalance in teenagers' lives that are just not on parents' radars at all because they never had to go through this before?
Well, I think that today's teenagers, there's no shut off. There's no disconnect from their friends and from their peers and what's going on in the outside world. Where I would submit that even when I was growing up, if I came home from school, if I came home from a practice, that was it. I could shut off the world unless the phone rang in the house and it was for me. But we didn't talk as much on the phone back then as we do now. Maybe we did, but there was still a separation, a boundary. Right now, there's no disconnect. A student comes home from school and they're right back onto still connected with their friends. And so there's no separation from that. I think the other thing that sometimes we miss as parents is that consistency is so important. And consistency is I'm not saying have breakfast at 8:00 and dinner at 5:00. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is that we need to be consistent in terms of what our rules are, what the boundaries are. When we say we're going to do something, then we do it. When we don't do something and we make a mistake, then we apologize for it. There has to be that consistency because all around them is uncertainty. And all around them is a lot of confusion. And so when they come home or with their parents or with their guardians, that's what they want. They want to know that consistency that they're there. I think the other big part of that too, Adam, is that sometimes parents miss, and I think even just in relationships in general, people miss this, is that we have to be present. We have to be present, like right here, right now, in the moment. And so you see it all the time where multitask does not, people say multitask works. Multitask for me, it doesn't work. And if you're going to be lasered in, you got to be lasered in if you're going to really produce the best results you're going to produce. And I think that even goes with a relationship. Are you really listening to your child? When you ask them how their day was, and then you go back into your phone, you're scrolling your email after you ask them how their day was, it doesn't carry the day. Just like if you asked your partner, how was your day? And then you went back into your phone, you started scrolling, your partner would call you out on it. Oftentimes be like, what are you doing? Get off your phone. You just asked me a question. Now you're on the phone. But sometimes we make a mistake and do that with our kids too.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, my wife and I try to call each other out on it when we do that to each other. And even though we kind of have this deal of, I want you to call me out if you see me doing that because I want to retrain my brain to not do that, our instinct is still to get frustrated when we get called out on it.
Which is so interesting. You start to feel like a little kid all over again, like you're getting in trouble again. I think that's the part of also making the agreements. And then when you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, that you're honest and you say, you know what, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. You know what, I was asked you a question just then and I realized I was on my phone there checking something. I'm trying to get better at that. We got to share our humanity, especially as parents too, Adam. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, and there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I think the most effective parents, in my experience, especially I've been doing this podcast now, 100 plus episodes with parents navigating the teen years, is that most parents, the biggest struggle is they feel guilty. They don't have the time. They don't have maybe the resource to be able to give to their child. And at the end of the day, the number one thing that their kid needs most of all is just that unconditional love and that support.
Mm-hmm. I recently listened to the episode of your podcast where your wife was your guest,
yes,
which I thought was awesome. And you brought up this concept of apologizing to your kids when you screw up. And I really liked that. It's something that I put into practice often, because I think it's important to let them know that this is a two-way relationship. And yes, ultimately, you know, their mom and I are the authorities. We want them to sense that there is structure here and there are rules here, but also that we can screw up and we're not perfect. And my hope is that by, you know, treating them with empathy and showing them that we're human beings and susceptible to screwing things up sometimes, that I guess it's what we all want, right? That we're raising kids that are well-rounded people who will then sort of carry that on in their lives and in their relationships. But another thing that came up in that podcast episode was being open to learning from your kids, which I thought was pretty cool, because again, they typically see us as the authority figures who know everything about everything, and we are their teachers, you know, when they're at home. But in reality, there's so much that we can and need to learn from our kids. And I thought that was a really interesting part of that chat that you had with your wife. Is there anything that you could unpack there for me?
Yeah, I think a big part of that, it comes down to communication. You have to create the time to create those moments of, especially because everybody's busy. All families are busy. Parents are busy. Parents are working to provide meals, provide the resources for their kids. And so everyone's busy. And so I just think it's important. It's really important to be intentional about where are we going to create some family time, or where am I going to create that one-on-one time with my child where we can go and even if it's just taking a ride to go to get an ice cream, or if it's like, I have to do an errand, can you get in the car with me? So just get in the car. Can we go walk the dog? But to get those moments to then ask those open-ended questions. If you say, you know, how was your day? And they say it was good, keep going. Like, what was good about it? So what have you been up to at school? Not too much. Well, of the little things that you're up to, what are the little things you're up to? And keep asking those open-ended questions, and you got to keep listening and listening. We want our kids to be confident that they can make those positive choices, navigate the world of all the different pressure they face in school and out of school. And I think one of the key things to help build our kids' confidence is to encourage them to be curious. Is that we really, no matter at all different ages, but really encourage them to be curious and to step outside of their comfort zone and take risks. I think one of the great responsibilities as parents one of the great opportunities as parents, and I think it is a responsibility, is that we try to expose our kids to as many different things as we can expose them to. Sports, music, arts, dance, travel, different, just history, all of that. It's just so important for them to really learn that life skill of being curious, because so many times I think we want our kids to find their way, and we want them to be happy. We want them to follow their passion in life. But the only way you can follow your passion, Adam, is through curiosity first. It's not passion first, it's curiosity first. So I think that was one of the big things also that Suzanne and I, my wife and I, talked about too, is we've really made a point, and I've talked with teachers about this too, is that we got to continue to encourage our students to be curious. And I think that's something we should continue throughout our lifetime.
I love that. I think that's so important. I wonder, for parents listening who have teenagers or kids who are soon to be teenagers like mine, who are 10 and 7, we know that is a period of immense growth, right? Of a lot of irrationality, a lot of experimentation and boundary pushing, and it's also a time when it can become very easy for a division to create between you and your kids because of, not to put all the blame on their irrationality, but there's a lot of butting heads, and you can naturally kind of want to push away from that rather than further engage with that. In working with a lot of young people and speaking to a lot of and listening to a lot of young people, if you have any advice for parents listening for how to keep ourselves kind of centered and in check so that we don't end up pushing our kids away when things start to feel impossible.
And that's the $1 million question, right, Adam? I think part of it does go back to keeping that open dialogue and communication with your teen. and continuing to have those conversations with them, even when they maybe are not as vocal. And that happens too, right? They get into that certain age where then they're also like, what happened to my child? That's not the child that I knew. They never slammed the door. They never talked back to me before. Two parts of that is one, I do goes back to that unconditional love of just continuing to let them know how much you love them, how much you appreciate them, how much you care about them. And you can do that in different ways. The visual, through the visual part of it, like with sending them a card. It could be the auditory with the verbal of I love you. And it's also done through your actions, showing them that you love them. But I just believe that as our kids grow older, even if like when you tell your 10-year-old I love you, they come back and they'll say I love you too, and they give you a big hug. You tell your 16-year-old sometimes I love you. They don't always maybe say that I love you back. They're jumping out of the car. I know that's not always the case, but oftentimes that is the case for many parents. And so I think you keep putting those I love yous and those I care about yous out there, because my experience has been talking with kids and listening to kids is that they are listening for it. And even though they might not respond to it. They know you're there. They know you're watching. That's that consistency thing. I know that my mom and dad are always there for me. I know my parents are always there for me, no matter what. I think it's also important too, as our children get older, it's so important to make sure that we separate the behavior from the person. And so when our teenager does make a mistake, that we say, what you did was wrong, or what you did was bad, what you did was terrible. But that's the behavior, not the person. And it's so important to make sure that you separate those two, because once you start telling the person you're bad, you should be ashamed of yourself. Look what you did to the family. You've now put them on the defensive, and now you're bringing shame and guilt into the conversation, and that certainly isn't healthy for any type of relationship, especially between a parent and a child.
We might have already kind of covered this, but what are some of the biggest mistakes or missteps that you see parents making during these formative years?
Adam, I would say I can just go back to the mistakes that I've made growing up by raising my teenager. I don't have to really talk about other mistakes other parents have made. And, maybe it's similar across the board, but for me, I think that has been something that I've had to work on is am I really being present with my child? Am I really being present in the conversation? And so it's easier said than done when you've had a long day at work, when you have you have a conference call at 8:00 at night, or, you're going to your second job. I mean, all these different things that are happening. So when you're that moment with your child, you have to be present. And so I think that's one mistake that I know that I've made at certain times, is to not be fully present.
Here's a question. You mentioned a while back in our chat about a teacher allowing and encouraging cell phone use in the classroom because of all the powerful and positive things that it can do. I know it's a very controversial in some ways topic about whether phones should be allowed in classrooms. And I've got a friend who is a high school teacher, and he does not allow them in his classroom. And so he collects them, at the beginning of the class and just kind of holds them until class lets out, and then they get them back. And he has had a student, just come in, walk in, essentially walk by him and say, not going to happen. And just continues on to his seat. And I know you do a lot of work to inspire, kindness and empathy and respect. And when I hear a story like that, I think, is it just this generation of middle schoolers, high schoolers who have learned that disrespect is okay? You can get away with it. Like, I wonder if you see that happening too, and if you have any thoughts on what might enable students to feel like it's okay to do that.
I think, there's a lot of times in conversation I hear people say, these kids today are entitled, and they feel privileged, and they don't show any gratitude, and they don't show any appreciation. Well, are there certain students that do feel entitled? Do they feel like your rules don't speak to me, or I'm above you? Yeah. And yet I would say, I don't think that is the majority. I really don't believe that. I've seen more resilience, more perseverance, more hope, more kindness, more generosity, more inspiring stories in the last 10 years than I remember even the first 20 years of my career. I have tremendous hope in the youth of today. I think there's great opportunity and possibility. As I say to kids, they're going to be doing jobs and creating their own jobs that haven't even been created yet before. And they're going to be doing jobs that haven't been created yet before, because the world is changing in a heartbeat. Part of that does start at home. And so, we can go back to modeling again in terms of, all the psychologists and all the studies show, your kids are watching you. They watch what you're saying and what you're doing, and they are modeling that behavior. And so if you're sitting around the kitchen table and you're ripping the school apart, and you're ripping the teachers apart, and you're ripping the educators apart, and you're ripping the town apart and the taxpayers apart, well, they're listening. And so they're going to model that behavior. There's so many times when I'll talk to students after a program sometimes, and they'll share with me their opinion on something. And I'm like, that's not even your opinion. You're speaking that sounds just like one of your parents. Because and that's naturally so, because all of our beliefs, all of the beliefs and our values that we develop as kids come from a number of different areas. One of them being our parents, the doctors that we go to, our faith, all those areas come into play. And then teachers play a huge role in that as well. I think sometimes when that breakdown happens, it comes down to leadership, whether it's leadership at the school or also leadership in the community. If you really want to get that gets a little bit more political, but it's true. Who's dictating the rules, who's dictating it, and how much input are the families and our students getting into those rules that are being put into the schools. Then to pull it back even more though, what are the rules and the boundaries that we have in our family? I was just talking to a parent the other day, and she was saying, she grew up in a very volatile household where people were yelling and screaming all the time. And that was just kind of how they expressed themselves. But it created a lot of angst and a lot of uncertainty in the household. So people were kind of walking around on pins and needles. They didn't know what to do. And so she promised herself that when she was a parent, she was going to change that and be like, I'm not going to have this people just yelling their emotions out that. And so they really created a family agreement where we're not yelling at people here in this house. We don't go and we don't raise our voice and start screaming, and we don't slam doors in our house. And that they start that off in a very early age of teaching that. So I know it's a long answer, but it's a how do we foster more gratitude within our children?
Yeah, thank you for that. I know you're a big proponent of having a kind of clearly defined set of family values, and it's something we've talked about on this show in the past. We both have sets of family values. We don't have them printed out on a piece of paper that's stuck to the refrigerator.
Right.
But we do have values, and we communicate these things to our kids, and it sort of guides how we make decisions as a family. And I think that there's so much value in having that list. But I would encourage listeners to check out your podcast and dig into some of those episodes, because there's some really great content there around that idea of values. I wanted to give you a chance to give our listeners just a quick synopsis or elevator pitch of your book, Shine Your Light. What inspired you to write this book, and what can people expect from it?
Sure, Adam. Yeah. So I wrote this book, Shine Your Light, Navigate Your Way to a Life You Love. And it's really about how do you build your confidence? How do you set and achieve your goals? How do you continue to reach out and make a difference? And it's really a culmination of my 30 years of work, of really sharing the principles that I've been sharing over these last few decades, from being grateful to being respectful to being responsible to being kind to, how do we create that growth mindset, and how do we continue to build our confidence through life? And so it's really, in a lot of ways too, I did it because it was something that I wanted a manifesto in a way to give to my kids, a little, almost like a legacy piece to say, this was my work in the world, and this is what I did. And I hope that that's what I practiced and did as a dad and as a father and as a friend. So yeah, I'm really happy with the book. It's all based around lighthouses and the ocean, and I'm really excited about it. And one of the big things I talk about in that book too, Adam, is just the importance of leading our lives with gratitude, but of really practicing the art of gratitude. Because you can talk about gratitude and how important it is to be grateful. Well, then how do you be grateful? The first thing you have to do in order to be grateful is you have to be in the present moment. Because if you're in the past and in your future, it gets very clouded. So if you get yourself into the present moment and say, what am I grateful for in my life right now? Not what am I grateful for in the past, because now we're living in the past. And then you say, well, I don't know what I can be grateful for right now. Well, then you can say, well, what if you were grateful for something? What would it be? And if you can't even think of that, then, well, what do you think other people are grateful for in their life? And my experience of talking with parents and my wife and I in our conversations, we want our kids to be independent. We want them to be able to be responsible and to go out in the world and, to navigate their way to a life they love. And I think as parents, we can do that. We can start to instill that independence and teaching them their responsibility. How? Some easy, simple things to do. One is even if it's all age appropriate, these activities, but like you could say, hey, both of you are in charge of making dinner tonight. What? Yep, you're going to make dinner tonight. Well, how are we going to make it? It's up to you. Here's $30. We'll even take you to the grocery store and you can buy what you want to buy. And you give them that empowerment. If you have a pet, or get a pet and teach them the responsibility of having a pet, that's another big thing. Or even we're going to go on a trip and say, you get to plan one of the days on the trip that we're going on. You're in charge of the itinerary. We did that with our son, even in his sophomore, junior year in high school. He wanted to go to a concert. We had him get online with us to buy the tickets, to learn how to navigate buying the tickets and, entering the credit card. To your point earlier, Adam, like our son in college said, Dad, he has like 3 kids that the kids didn't even know how to do they didn't even know how to do the laundry. And one kid didn't even know how to make spaghetti. He didn't even know how to even cook. He had no idea even how to even, he had never cooked for himself. So we have to raise an adult. There's a great book called How to Raise an Adult. I forget the author, but that's some of the other things to talk about in the book too, just being responsible.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that and would encourage our listeners to check it out too. Last question, what are you grateful for right now as it pertains to fatherhood and your fatherhood experience?
I'm grateful that my kids are finding their way, and that I've seen our relationship change as our daughter becomes an 18-year-old and our son becomes now a 19-year-old. That I realize the conversations are becoming more adult-like. That I'm not talking to my son or my daughter like when they were 14 or 15. I'm really having conversations with them as young adults. And I kind of feel in a lot of ways, yes, I'm their father, but what I'm really grateful for right now is that in some ways I feel like I'm coming even more as a consultant, saying, here's something to think about. Here's one avenue you could look at, instead of telling them what to do. Like, it's 9:00, it's time to go to bed, instead of saying, hey, what do you think might be what are you thinking about this situation? So I'm grateful for that next level of that conversation, which has been really rewarding because they get to see their thought processes and how they see the world. And I'm grateful that I think that we have done the best that we could to kind of pass along some of our values and our traditions over to them. But I'm grateful to have a partner to share that with too, along with this journey.
It's a whole lot of gratitude.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Dads and moms listening, we'll include links in the episode notes to everything you could possibly want to know about Ed Gerety, but you can also type in edgerety.com, edgerety.com, and learn all about his professional services. Ed, it was really nice reconnecting with you. It's been a long time. I'm a fan of what you do. I think it will always be important, and you are just a master of it. So thanks for sharing some of your wisdom and some stories about your own family too.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing and keep making a difference, and all the best to your family.
Thank you so much.
I just said something stupid to one of my kids.
Instant regret.
I wish I could take it back, but I can't.
Instant regret.
Stupid.
Instant regret.
I've got an instant regret.
So you're not a perfect person.
I know, contrary to popular belief. Mm-hmm. You want to hear it?
Dude, I would love nothing more than
All
to
right.
hear about a recent misstep of yours.
Here goes.
Okay.
So both my girls, are into dance, and they both have this performance coming up. And so, my wife typically handles, getting all of their dance stuff organized, making sure they have all the leotards and the tights and all the dance stuff that they need. So anyway, an envelope from Amazon showed up the other day. We were at the house, my wife tears it open, and she pulls out a dark brown hair net. But if you can picture a hair net, it's like all crumpled up and just into a little ball in the package. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she holds it up to me, and without even thinking, I go, kind of looks like a merkin. Do you know what a merkin is?
I do know what a merkin is. Yes.
And so, we kind of chuckled, and my daughter's in the other room, my 10-year-old, and she's like, what? So my wife and I are looking at each other like, what are we going to do? And she's like, what did Daddy say? So it was like a moment of really uncomfortable, like trying to think of how I get myself out of this. And I go, American. Like, have you ever heard somebody say like American? And so then my wife kind of got on board, and she's like, like American. And my daughter's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so we were able to pivot the conversation to trying to explain to her, and I don't even think I actually know the explanation, trying to explain to our 10-year-old why some people say the word American like American.
Yeah.
I don't even know how would you even explain that? What is the joke aside from it being like?
Well, yeah, it's it's really just an accent thing. I mean, at that point, I think it's funny that you pivoted to something else that also requires a fair amount of explanation and possibly even still a little bit of an uncomfortable,
little bit controversial
to talk about. Yeah. I mean, it's, I want to say, like, for me, the American thing really kind of comes, I feel like it's a South Park thing.
Okay. Do you think
is that really where it came from? Where I kind of got it from?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's, maybe I'm just confusing it with, they took our germs. Remember that episode?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just conflating those things, but I feel like I kind of got it from South Park. But yeah, I mean, no, it's like, I mean, if you're being honest, right? It's like you say it when you're making fun of people who are, sort of like maybe overly patriotic.
I was just going to say that exact phrase.
Yeah. It might be like an overly patriotic sort of, while simultaneously kind of being unplugged from what really makes America America.
Yeah.
I think that's the irony piece of it. It's like, I'm super duper patriotic, but also like, I don't really pay super close attention to like what's actually going on.
I mean, very, very relevant to current political climate.
Sure.
But
so now your daughter's walking around going like,
America.
And that's better than her knowing what American is.
I would say yes. I would posit that it is better than knowing what American is. But I'll tell you what, when I said kind of looks like American, and she said, what? From the other room, instantly regretted it.
Oops. Well done. Well, good job on the pivot, I guess.
I guess so. Well, I think that's the episode.
America.
You want to close it out? You want to do the
American.
You want to do the 40-second closeout?
Okay, start the timer. You ready?
and go.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Modern Dadhood. Please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, and wherever you do subscribe, consider leaving a quick rating or a review, be it on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify.
These things are eating into the time.
Hark Audio. How many seconds do I have left?
Well, you've taken up
Including
24 seconds.
Oh, man. Okay. And if you don't do that, that's fine. Just tell one person about the show at the very least. Thank you. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Am I missing any? LinkedIn, sure. If you're like on the business side of things and you want to know all about dad stuff there too, then follow us there. Oh, God. Don't forget about our website, which is moderndadhood.com, where you can find our back catalog of all of our episodes. You can also purchase a t-shirt or a Modern Dad hoodie.
There's still time before the holidays.
And the holidays are coming up. Every order ships with a free sticker. Let's see, what else? You can also contact us through the form on our website, or you can write us an email directly at hey@moderndadhood.com. Thank you to Casper Baby Pants and Spencer Albee for all the music on the show that you hear. Thank you to Ed Gerety for taking time out of his day to speak with Adam. And the final thank you always goes to me, but today I'm going to give it to Adam.
And I will say thank you for listening.
Is that what I sound like? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Podcast. Just a modern.